Yo guys, it's your boy. Today we're talking about Rudolf Steiner and the field of anthroposophy itself. Like, for those of you who don't know Rudolf Steiner, you're missing out on a great deal. Like, Rudolf Steiner is the one who actually made me understand like Christianity from a holistic perspective. Like, and he brought the spiritual science of anthroposophy, which is a spiritual philosophy that views human from a holistic perspective and makes human connected wholly to the universe. Like his science, a lot of people like mainstream consider as pseudoscience whatsoever, but when it comes to spiritual science and philosophy, like spiritual philosophy, there's none of the dude actually like knows what he's talking about than Rudolf Steiner. Like, and Eternalize actually dropped a video about it, but we're just gonna react to it. But stuff to Eternalize, bro, they make like good content, like straight up.
And Sophia. From the beginning, spiritual reality was as certain to Rudolf Steiner as physical reality. He lived in both the invisible and visible worlds. He saw his task as connecting them. For a long time, however, the invisible world seemed more real. Rudolf Steiner was an Austrian philosopher who founded anthroposophy.
Why he's so controversial is that in the age of full materialism and every like age on the advent of materialistic reductionist science, he brings up spiritual philosophy, which might be like viewed as an attack on mainstream science itself, but it is like the true science because human body has souls in them. Like we're not just materialistic flesh that automatically wants animates us with the consciousness. There's actually souls in us, like, and when he actually makes sense of it, like you'll see what I'm talking about.
Term derived from the Greek anthropos, human being, and Sophia, wisdom, meaning wisdom of the human being. Alongside this term, he also used other expressions to describe his work, most notably spiritual science and occult science. These terms reflect his intention to present his work not as a closed system of beliefs, but as a method of investigating both the human being and the world. Steiner used the term spiritual science to describe his approach that aspires to be as rigorous as scientific thinking, while going beyond the limits of sensory observation. Through what he called sense-free thinking, he aimed to attain supersensible knowledge, or insight into higher worlds, maintaining that thinking provides, in its essence, a portal to the spiritual world.
And a lot of people will have a hard time understanding spiritual consciousness, and the modern advent of humanity and sciences deny anything metaphysical. So a lot of people have this much, have this notion like everything else that's not scientifically proven, like not have observable empirical data, is sometimes like considered as pseudoscience false because the elites actually made you to think that way, like. But there's metaphysical reality to certain things, and when you start understanding like not everything's not everything that is built upon sense perception. Like there are things outside our sense perception that you cannot actually see. Like not just regarding souls itself. There are things like angelic beings, all those astral beings actually that we cannot perceive by our senses. That's why sense perception is not the only form of knowledge, or like empirical data is not the only form of like true knowledge.
Spiritual science is not just one worldview among others that seeks to satisfy one's thirst for knowledge. It also seeks to develop a relationship with one's innermost being and the world, bringing inner calm and meaning to one's life. Steiner states, "Anthroposophy is a path of knowledge to guide the spiritual in the human being to the spiritual in the universe. It arises in man as a need of the heart, of the life of feeling, and it can be justified only inasmuch as it can satisfy this inner need. He alone can acknowledge anthroposophy, who finds in it what he himself in his own inner life feels impelled to seek. Hence, only they can be anthroposophists who feel certain questions on the nature of man and the universe as an elemental need of life, just as one feels hunger and thirst."
It is like a perpetual hunger for truth, and spiritual science of anthroposophy gives you a guide how to structure soul structure, how to structure your life. It gives you like guidelines how to, you know, transform your soul and make your soul in a disciplined fashion, like have a disciplined and orderly structure to the soul. If the soul has no disciplined structure, like we do some random shit that doesn't even like contribute to our life being actually evolving. Like we do a lot of like dumb shit. So anthropology gives us a structure for souls to actually seek the truth and have inner life, like have that inner freedom and have inner life in itself.
Steiner was a prolific writer and lecturer. His collected works span roughly 400 volumes in the German edition. The majority consist of surviving records of his approximately 6,000 lectures, many of which were later edited and published in book form. Topics
Yeah, I think that's like an archive. Rudolf Steiner's archive. You can actually check that out. Like every one of his works actually there.
are wide-ranging and include education, Christology, mysticism, human evolution, natural science, art, agriculture, social reform, among others. Steiner developed the Waldorf school movement, opening the first school in Germany for the children of factory workers. From these modest beginnings grew what is now one of the largest independent school movements in the world. He introduced the expressive art of eurythmy, which he called visible speech or visible singing, and wrote 4 mystery dramas intended for stage performance: The Portal of Initiation, The Soul's Probation, The Guardian of the Threshold, and The Soul's Awakening. These contain the essential content of anthroposophy. Steiner launched the biodynamic farming movement, which predated modern organic agriculture, in response to farmers seeking guidance on declining soil quality and food conditions. He also developed anthroposophical medicine in order to complement conventional medicine by considering human beings not only as physical entities, but also as beings of soul and spirit.
You can actually view Rudolf Steiner's view on heart itself. He never sees organs as like this materialistic organ like contributing to a certain function. There's also a spiritual component to organs itself. He views from an etheric perspective, like heart is not just pumping blood. Like it is like a heart is not just like pumping blood and like doing the same doing the things that we actually know in science, but heart is also like an electromagnetic field, like amplifies aura, like amplifies emotion itself. Like heart has like a separate function, like other than our natural six sense explanation. Like Steiner also breaks it down like effectively the our organs and like certain things in our body has like a spiritual function to it also, not just a naturalistic materialistic function.
He designed the Goetheanum, the main building of the Anthroposophical Society, and he worked for 8 years on the 9.5 meter high wooden sculpture known as the representative of humanity. The beauty of Steiner is that he was not only a philosopher absorbed in the world of ideas and the natural sciences, nor simply an explorer of the spiritual world, but also someone who brought his ideas into practical life while remaining firmly grounded. His work was consistently motivated by concern for human development and for the earth, and above all, by a desire to place the knowledge he had acquired in the service of the world. Steiner had an extraordinary discipline. His will was like a cannonball that, once fired, shot directly towards its target, sweeping away everything in its path. His focus was like a concentrated laser beam, so precise that nothing could distract him from his duty. We would achieve much in our lives if we could incorporate these two qualities into our daily life. Steiner was not only careful with his thoughts, but also his actions, speech, and even movements. He sought to cultivate Gemüt, which he described as living in the center of the soul life, and without which, he maintained, all anthroposophy becomes largely futile. The term is difficult to translate, but it roughly means a warmth of soul arising when thinking and feeling are in harmony. In the Gemüt lives the spark in which the world soul reveals itself in the human soul. Steiner's anthroposophic work should be approached in 2 ways. First, through the books and lectures he prepared for the general public, and second, through the great number of lecture courses originally intended for private circulation, among the members of the Theosophical Society and later the Anthroposophical Society. These courses consist of more or less accurate notes taken at his lectures, which he did not have the time to correct, and consequently, some passages may contain inaccuracies or errors. He would have preferred the spoken word to remain the spoken word, but members wanted the lectures printed for private study, and so the lecture courses came into existence. Had there been sufficient time to revise them, the original restriction of for members only would have been unnecessary. In time, however, this restriction was removed altogether. For this reason, if one wishes to gain an accurate understanding of anthroposophy, one should begin with the public material, for it is the result of Steiner's own inner struggle to express anthroposophy to the wider public. The private work, by contrast, arose from a joint struggle between Steiner and the members of the society, and was often shaped by their particular interests and questions. Steiner wrote his autobiography in weekly installments for 70 weeks. The last chapter was published 5 days after his death. He had written to the very end and stopped, interrupted, as it were, in mid-sentence, leaving his story unfinished. At the end of each installment, Steiner added, "Continued in the next issue." Interestingly, he omitted this statement at the end of the 70th installment. Although he admitted that he was not very inclined to write about his own life, believing that one
Almost like he hinted on like intended like reincarnation. I know Steiner actually, propagates transmigration of souls itself. Like, Steiner's ideology made Christianity more sense to me. In like, Orthodox like mainstream Christian doctrine, like in the current doctrine of Christianity, like reincarnation is like considered as heresy or considered as heretic. Like a lot of churches actually that don't even think about reincarnation, but ancient church fathers like Origen promote a little form of universalism. Like reincarnation actually like has a suitable position in Christianity itself. Like it actually made more sense to me. A lot of people has the question like, is the salvation available to some dude who's actually born in the North Sentinelese Island, like someone who's never even heard of Christ whatsoever? So like when Steiner talks about the transmigration of souls itself, it actually made more sense. Like reincarnation as a central position in Christianity itself, like, and souls have multiple lives in and out of itself. Like, and it has a place in Christianity itself. Like ancient church Origen actually talks about it also. Like that's what I say. Like, and mainstream Christian doctrine have went away from reincarnation whatsoever. Like, and rightfully so, because a lot of people would not take their life seriously if if we actually propagate that there's a million other chances to make things right. But like this actually idea of transmigration made actually sense. I mean, made the Christian theology makes actually more sense to me. Like, that's my personal opinion.
One's personality should be shown through one's words and deeds, rather than by looking at one's personality. He nevertheless undertook the work at the urgent request of friends. He also wished to present an objective path of his spiritual life, and to correct numerous misconceptions about anthroposophy. In his autobiography, Steiner aims to describe his spiritual development. He does not only focus on inner experience, but stays closely to his life's outer pattern, for spiritual reality is expressed through ordinary lived experience, and cannot be separated from it. He frequently dwells on passing friendships with affection and respect. Steiner had an incredibly sociable disposition and affability, and consequently made many friends. Yet various times, at one stroke, a very valuable human relationship that he would have gladly retained was taken from him. This he recognized as a stroke of destiny or karma. For Steiner, every encounter is a significant relationship, as we all live our lives simultaneously alone as separate individualities, and in a web of interrelationship with others. What we experience or achieve is certainly the fruit of our own effort, but that effort would not have succeeded without the countless contributions of others. Through others we may become aware of ourselves, and through us others may become aware of themselves. Steiner felt that one could learn a great deal about a person's struggles and goals in life by perceiving a person's spiritual background. which is like the transition from a casual to a more intimate friendship. Rudolf Steiner was born in 1861 in Donji Kraljevic, which was then part of the Kingdom of Hungary in the Austrian Empire and is now in Croatia. He describes growing up in a wonderful landscape with mountains and forests, and at the same time being exposed to the modern developments of his day through the railway, telegraphy, and a spinning mill. These natural and technological influences would have a formative effect on his life.
He also made a lot of mainstream predictions that actually came true in today's time. Like, the amount of predictions about like relationships and marriage they actually made 100% became, and consciousness itself has become true in our current modern reality.
At the ages of 5 and 7, Rudolf had a paranormal encounter. A woman appeared to him and spoke words that may be rendered, "Try now and later in life to help me as much as you can." She then went to the stove and disappeared into it. This event impressed him greatly, but he told no one, for he would have been scolded for being superstitious. At the very hour when Rudolf had seen that apparition, his aunt had ended her life. He never met her, nor had heard of her. This marked the beginning of his lifelong interest in the dead. About 40 years later, Steiner
Whoa, that's fucking tripping.
referred to this incident in a 1913 lecture, speaking of himself in the third person. A boy who experiences such things in early childhood and tries to understand them according to his soul disposition knows that when such a thing is experienced consciously, he lives in the spiritual worlds. From that event onwards, a new life began in his soul. He became conscious.
Certain people have spiritual experiences that like changes the way how they actually view the world itself. Like, a lot of people have a spiritual encounters. I'm not just talking about psychedelics and DMT and shit. Like, that movie itself also, like, there's a lot of psychedelics and DMT that actually heals relationships also. Like, we all always heard the story of them destroying drugs actually destroying relationship, but a lot of psychedelics actually also help in healing relationship. And anytime when we go through a DMT trip, like, they encounter like spiritual beings, and that changes the entire reality from like being a materialistic atheist to know there's some shit actually out there. There's a spiritual counterparts and entities to certain shit. Like, there's something shit. There's some intelligence order or some shit going around, not just our sense perception, materialistic worldview. Like, there's some spiritual shit going on in the background. Like, and once people have spiritual experiences, it actually changes their life whatsoever. Like, some people have NDE, the near-death experiences, actually change their worldview. It's like God giving you a second chance, change your worldview. And some people have actually seen Christ in dreams and near-death experiences, actually. And this have like a surefire effect on person's soul disposition and also like how they view their entire world in life. Like, a lot of spiritual interactions actually heal you with traumatic experiences also, like, also change your life trajectory too.
Just not only of the trees and mountains that speak to the human soul, but also of the spiritual worlds that lie behind them, inhabited by nature spirits. In another lecture, he would later state, "The whole being of man can be infinitely strengthened when his consciousness is filled not only with the realization of his firm stand here in the physical world, but with the inner realization that comes to him when he can say of the dead whom he has loved, 'The dead are with us, they are in our midst.' This too is part of a true knowledge and understanding of the spiritual world. The dead are in our midst." This sentence is in itself an affirmation of the spiritual world, and only the spiritual world can awaken within us the consciousness that the dead are, in very truth, with us. An important event occurred when Rudolf discovered a geometry book in his
What he's talking about, like, people who have passed away in the spiritual, maybe the spiritual realm, like, they have some kind of spiritual access to our own lives. They can actually see, like, and like, the phrase like our ancestors are watching. Like, sometimes it could possibly imply to be true also. Like, our ancestors maybe actually be watching us. Like, and there is like a spiritual force to it. Like, to our bloodline itself, there's a spiritual force to it.
his assistant teacher's room, which he was allowed to borrow, and which he plunged into with enthusiasm. He writes, "I derived a deep feeling of contentment from the fact that one could live with a soul in building forms that are seen wholly inwardly, independent of the outer senses. I found consolation for my mood caused by so many unanswered questions. The ability to grasp something purely through the spirit brought me an inner joy. I realized that I first knew happiness through geometry. I felt that knowledge of the spiritual world must in fact be carried within the soul just as geometry is. The spiritual world's reality was as certain to me as the physical world's reality. I had two mental images that, although still undefined, played an important role in my inner life, even before my 8th year. I differentiated between things and beings that are visible and things that are invisible.
Someone who's spiritually clairvoyant can actually see those kinds of things and make a clear differentiation. Can actually see, certain people have higher amount of clairvoyance because when you certain people subject to spiritual experiences, they can actually see shit like whenever you actually have tired, you see something black or something like uh something that actually shook you, something black actually like entities like it is kind of like a remnants of your clairvoyant experiences. Like in ancient times, a lot of people had this clairvoyance. Their human beings were so clairvoyant they actually have spiritual experiences, frequent spiritual experiences. So in the modern times, our consciousness have shifted to much more intelligence based. We traded that shit. It's consciousness much more intelligence based. So we can and you only perception of things that of what your brain actually agrees. Like modern education makes your brain actually numb to spiritual experiences because modern education, modern system is flawed. Not flawed, bro. It's clearly demonstrably wrong itself. Like modern science never touched the aspect of soul. Modern text never touched the aspect of spirit itself. And that's done intentionally. Like ancient science traditions used to teach the spirit, soul, and the attributes of soul itself. Modern science never touched anything to do with soul, and they consider that pseudoscience. That's why it's a problem with modern imperialistic sense perception science. You can actually see the five elements throughout antiquity. It's how they perceive, you know, water, fire, air, earth, and the ether itself.
Would have experienced the sensory world as a surrounding spiritual darkness if it had not received light from the other world. Mathematics remains significant for Steiner as the foundation of his entire efforts for knowledge, as it offers a system of mental images and concepts built up independently of all sense perceptions. Nevertheless, he felt that it is precisely these mental images of the supersensible world that constitute the essence of the sensible world. Although his parents were not religious, one of Steiner's most vivid childhood memories was serving as an altar boy at church, where he experienced the solemnity of liturgical music and observed the priest acting as a mediator between the sensible and supersensible worlds.
A lot of people say that Rudolph Steiner is taking some form of like a heretical form, like it's against Christianity. Well, I don't see it that way. Like Steiner in his own way, he loved Christ in every regard whatsoever. Like I don't see he's going against like Christ teaching us something that's contrary to the Bible itself, or teaching something that's that much heretical. It'll doom you to salvation, doom you to like hell, or like doom you away from salvation itself. Like everything he actually teaches is in correspondence with Christianity itself, with a little caveat of reincarnation or transmigration of the soul.
This was not a mere form for him, but a profound inner experience, and this was even more so since it made him a stranger in his own home. He had striven to develop harmony between his thinking and religious instruction, a task he considered vitally important. In his adolescence, Steiner began to tutor fellow students, which forced him to concern himself with practical psychology and the difficulties of human soul development. He once tutored a boy considered so abnormal in his physical and mental development that the family doubted he could be educated at all. Steiner felt that an education adapted to his individual condition would awaken his dormant capacities. He was convinced that the child had great intellectual capacities. By gaining the child's love and using carefully adjusted methods, including shorter lessons, the child improved significantly, and after a few years, he passed the entrance exams for classical studies. His health also improved. He entered a school of medicine and became a physician. Serving in that capacity, he was killed in the First World War. Through his years of tutoring, Steiner became familiar with the needs of young people and basic methods of modern education. This proved useful when he would later develop the methods of education behind the Waldorf school movement. He realized that education must be an art based on true knowledge of the human being.
Yeah, totally contradictory to a modern system of education. Like our modern system of education is fucking like brutal, bro. Like it's fucking shit. Like In that terms, Steiner was way ahead of the curve.
The whole task of education is not about giving out information, but awakening hidden potential. The mind is not a vessel to be filled, but a fire to be kindled.
Yeah, it totally goes against the modern education system of regurgitating information and doing exams. That's not how education should be done. Education should be done to awaken the hidden potential of a human. Like, it should not be done to like regurgitate stupid shit and put it on an exam sheet paper. That's fucking like, those will make you not just a slave. That will make you like spiritually numb, and that will make you life worthless, and give you a life perception that life has no meaning.
One day, Steiner passed a bookstore. In the window was the Critique of Pure Reason by Kant, the great philosopher of the 18th century. He did everything he could to buy that book as soon as possible. His unbounded interest in the book arose entirely from his personal soul life. However, he found no time to read it. Because of the long distance between home and school, he had to walk at least 3 hours every day and never got home until 6. Then there was endless homework to do. The young Steiner, however, found it.
Kant's Critique of Pure Reason is a very good book. It's just everyone should read it. It criticized like Kant being like a impressive philosopher itself. Like, he actually like very critical of how someone derives their epistemology from, like, Kant was very critical about that fact. And first principles, it's very hard for first principles to be demonstrated and to derive their epistemology. Like, that's critical. That's Kant's Critique of Pure Reason. Like, there's an explanation how someone derives their epistemology from in an empirical form of view, without any form of theism or whatsoever.
A solution. His history teacher seemed to be lecturing when he taught, but was in fact merely reading from a book. So Steiner inserted sections of Kant's text into his history book and studied them during class. During holidays, he continued reading Kant intensely and read many pages more than 20 times before moving on. This, however, did not draw him away from practical life and the development of human skills. Intuitively, Steiner felt that he should be able to penetrate natural phenomena and know them in themselves. Kant had denied this possibility. The young Steiner had not the faintest idea that, as a mature philosopher, he would refute Kant, who had proclaimed that there are absolute limits to human knowledge. At the age of 18, Steiner attends the Vienna Institute of Technology.
Yeah, so Kant said that limits to human knowledge, that limits to epistemology. Like, human beings cannot like give an account of justification for like how first principles are demonstrated, or how to give a justification how first principle exists in itself. Like, why are they true in the first place?
For mathematics, natural history, and chemistry. He also continued avidly reading philosophy on his own, especially the German idealists Kant, Fichte, Schelling, and Hegel. Steiner felt that his duty was to seek truth through philosophy, and his task was to study mathematics and natural science. He was convinced that he would find no relation to these sciences unless their results rested on a secure philosophical foundation. However, Steiner was deeply concerned that none of the philosophies he studied could extend to perception of the spiritual world. In the esoteric tradition, it is said that those who are inspired by a disinterested yearning for the higher truth find a master who initiates them at the appropriate moment, but the desire must be as ardent as a flame. Through a remarkable combination of circumstances, Steiner met Felix Kogutsky, a humble herb gatherer and healer who could see deeply into the secrets of nature. He had been initiated into the secrets of the effectiveness of all plants and the connection with the cosmos and with human nature. Felix spoke of dealing with nature spirits as if it were the most ordinary and natural thing, which only increased Steiner's interest.
If you think nature spirits are weird, like Pericles also talks about it. Like, it's considered one of like the greatest physician of the antiquity. Like, he also talks about like nature spirits and shit, like the healing. So this nature spiritual healing, like, it has been for throughout antiquity and centuries.
He would later honor the herb gatherer in his mystery dramas. Felix later reveals himself to be the emissary of a higher initiatory personality, an actual master who instructs Steiner to penetrate Fichte's philosophy and to master modern scientific thinking as a preparation for right entry into the spirit. Steiner referred to this enigmatic figure only sparingly as Master or simply M. Through his study of Fichte's science of knowledge, Steiner saw that the activity of the human eye is the only possible starting point for true knowledge. Previously, he had agonized over finding concepts that apply to natural phenomena, from which one could then derive a concept for the eye. Now his goal was just the opposite. Beginning with the eye being, he wanted to delve into the creative process in nature. The master might have perhaps been one of those powerful people who remain unknown to the world.
When he's talking about the eye, he's actually talking about the seat of consciousness itself, your true self, your divine eye, which you can synonymously use with soul itself, but it is like the truest form of your eye. Like, it's not like total mutually analogous with the soul itself. Like, it is the seat of consciousness. That's the true you, your true eye. Like, it is a difficult concept to understand.
Living behind an ordinary profession while carrying out a secret mission known only to a few initiates. Such people appear to have no visible effect on human events, yet their anonymity is what makes them effective. In this way, they awaken, prepare, and guide those who act in the open. The master did not have to do much for the initiation of his disciple, only to show Steiner how to make use of his own nature to provide him with everything he needed. He told him something along the lines of, "If you want to fight the enemy, you must understand him. You can only conquer the dragon by putting on its skin."
Whenever we talk about conquer the dragon, it's just an allegory for like conquering your base desires, conquering your passions, conquering your like vices. Like,
your strength and your allies will appear in times of greatest difficulty. I have shown you who you are. Now go and be yourself. Steiner's
he also talks about paralleling with Jung's form of like, talks about individuality. You should cultivate your identity. You should cultivate your individual identity. Like, you should have an identity in this life, not just based upon like, not to be like be in a herd mentality, be part of the system. Your life will be much more colorful if you have a sense of strong identity, strong identity can only be established by conquering your base desires and passions. Like, he also like advocates a form of individuality and identity.
mission was to combine science with religion, to bring God into science and nature into religion, and thereby to fertilize art and life anew. In his childhood,
yeah, there was like a huge disconnect in that time between science and religion. Like, and people see science and religion as two antithetical things in modern world, but those things are closely intricate and closely related to each other. Like, not just two distant entities. These things should inextricably tied together. Like, and whenever there's any attempt by any like post-industrial philosopher try to connect the science spiritual aspect and the scientific aspect, I heavily fuck with that, like straight up.
Steiner was introduced to Goethe, widely considered the most influential writer in the German language, who also made significant contributions to natural science, though these were largely rejected by mainstream science. Now, after having completed his college studies, Steiner was asked to edit Goethe's scientific works, and went on to publish several volumes on them. His own experiments drove him increasingly towards Goethe's views, and away from the usual view of physicists. He writes, "I thought that light is not perceived by the senses at all. We see the colors through the light. Light reveals itself everywhere as perceptions of color, but it is not physically perceived itself. White light is not light, but a color. Thus, for me, light was in fact an extrasensory reality within the sensory world." Steiner studied the natural sciences from every possible direction, especially the forms of the human, animal, and plant organisms. He was concerned, like Goethe, to begin with directly observable phenomena, not with a thought construct. Through the study of patterns and relations between the phenomena, one finds the building blocks of physical existence, which come from the spiritual world. Steiner wanted to demonstrate that in his theory of metamorphosis, Goethe takes the position that we must think of the activity in organic nature as corresponding to the spirit. He saw that a Goethean observation of nature is a science of nature that leads to a science of spirit. Steiner found relief from his sense of spiritual isolation when he read a conversation between Goethe and Schiller. Goethe presented his Urpflanze, archetypal plant, the objective essence or unified form underlying all plant structures. Schiller, influenced by Kant, saw this only as an idea formed by the human reason from observing parts, whereas Goethe argued that the whole could be directly perceived, both in the world of ideas and in the world of experience, with no strict division between the two. only a transition from one to the other. When Schiller insisted it was merely an idea and not an experience, Goethe replied, "Then I may rejoice that I have ideas without knowing it, and can even see them with my own eyes." Steiner felt that he had come to understand these words of Goethe. To him, they meant inner peace after a long struggle. He had found a kindred spirit. Whoever acknowledges to thinking its ability to perceive beyond the grasp of the senses must necessarily acknowledge that it also has objects that lie beyond merely sense-perceptible reality. The objects of thinking, however, are ideas. Inasmuch as thinking takes possession of the idea, thinking fuses with the primal ground of world existence. What is at work outside enters into the spirit of man. He becomes one with objective reality in its highest potency. Becoming aware of the idea within reality is the true communion of man. It was Goethe, then as now largely misunderstood, who gave Steiner a solid philosophical foundation for building bridges between the material and spiritual worlds. In 1890, Steiner starts his work in the Goethe-Schiller archives, where he remains for 7 years. It was a low-paying and tedious job, but he found the time to write his main philosophical works. Steiner reflects on the thoughts and
Yo, philosophers are the most underpaid guys ever. Like, they contribute so much to humanity, but all of them died dirt poor. That's why he said you should always be rich, then do philosophy. Like, you should never like. But certain people has this kind of natural inclination for philosophy, and they will go through broke fucking lives just to satisfy the desire of philosophy. Like, I respect 100% that kind of life. But like, if anybody's trying to do philosophy, I suggest anyone actually to get rich in the first place. Like, then do philosophy.
ideas that occupied him the first 3 decades, which form a self-contained chapter. He writes, "I constantly stress that the human soul manifests as a true reality when engaged not in thinking drawn from the sensory world, but in the free activity of thinking that goes beyond sensory perceptions. I presented such sense-free thinking as what the human soul utilizes to stand within the spiritual being of the world. To me, it made no sense to speak about limits of knowledge. To know was to rediscover the spiritual meaning experienced through the soul in the perceived world. My primary concern in bringing forth my own insights was to refute the theory that there are limits to knowledge. Thinking has the same relationship to ideas that the eye has to light and ear to sound. It is the organ for apprehending. It was really my intention to show that the being in the sensory world is spirit, rather than to describe the spiritual world as it appears when sense-free thinking goes beyond the experience of itself to perceive spirit. Nature is in fact spiritual. It was my intention to show that, in thinking, one does not form images about the world, as though outside it, but that cognizing is experience. In the act of knowing, one is within the being of things." In his 30s, Steiner realized how little he had truly participated.
I know for the outsider, these kinds of flowery language, this kinds of like poetic language would be like very trouble. But people who haven't read these kinds of works, like, it will be very hard for you to understand. A lot of spiritual innuendos when they're talking about the eye, when they're talking about like spirit and sensory world. So if you're coming from like a purely philosophical background perspective, it must be very truly hard to actually understand like what the fuck he's actually saying. Like,
In the outer world, up to that point. When he withdrew from social life, he became aware that the only world he had been familiar with was the spiritual world he witnessed inwardly. By contrast, he found it very difficult, in childhood and youth, to relate to the sensory world. He often needed repeated observation to recognize and remember natural objects. To him, the external world really appeared somewhat shadowy or like images. It moved past him like pictures, whereas the connection with the spiritual always had the character of concrete reality. Steiner experienced a midlife crisis and started to feel increasingly isolated from others. He could enter into the feelings and thoughts of others, yet he felt that few could enter into his inner life. He felt that he had to cross a threshold when he wanted to interact with the outer world, feeling more like a visitor than a participant.
damn, we feel him. We feel him. Like, I feel you, bro. Like, we all went through the same shit.
I lived in the spiritual world. Not one of all those I knew followed me there. My social interactions involved visits to the world of others. Nevertheless, I loved those excursions. This was the nature of my loneliness in Weimar, where I led an active social life.
Only a lonely person could actually, do philosophical treatise on penetrate into the deep spiritual matters. Like, you had to be lonely in a certain extent. Like only those kinds of dudes can actually, most of the philosophers are actually lonely. Only those kinds of people can actually like dig deep into the deep philosophical aspects of reality and spiritual reality. Like you have to live that life. It's not, you cannot fake that life. You have to live that lonely life. Like you have to be that person, bro. Like
When Steiner spoke to others about his experiences of the spiritual world, no one wanted to hear about them. Even his close friends strongly rejected his spiritual life. One of them often told him that he had alienated himself from what is essentially human, that he rationalized his soul impulses. His friend had the impression that Steiner's feeling life was transformed into pure thought life, and he experienced this as a kind of coldness from him. Steiner writes, "My friend considered me a rationalist. I felt this to be the greatest misunderstanding of my spiritual path. Thinking that leads away from reality and gets lost in abstractions repelled me. My friend was aware that I followed thoughts beyond physical reality, but he was unaware that, at the very moment of doing so, I entered the spirit. When I spoke
damn, that's deep.
of spiritual facts, it seemed to him that I spoke of something unreal. To him, my words were merely a web of abstract concepts. I suffered greatly, because, as far as my friend was concerned, I spoke of something non-existent by speaking of what I considered the most important matters." This was also true of many others. During the time of his midlife crisis, Steiner gave his book, The Philosophy of Freedom, its final form, the substance of which had lived within him for a long time. It was published in 1894, and later translated into English as The Philosophy of Spiritual Activity, or Intuitive Thinking as a Spiritual Path. This is his most important book, and main philosophical work, which provides the foundation for everything that came later. He states, "Writing that book, I felt I was writing out thoughts handed to me by the spiritual world until my 30th year." For Steiner, to be truly free, we must be conscious of the motives of our actions, instead of letting instincts, urges, and passions unconsciously determine our actions and lives. In such cases, the true self is unable to reveal itself, and we live in illusion.
True self only reveal itself. Like true I, you can only understand the needs of the soul if you actually like conquer your base desires. That's what every ancient philosopher throughout antiquity tells us. Like, and this message has been lost throughout antiquity for obvious reasons. There's an elitist structure controlling information. You all know that.
Free spirits act out of their impulses, that is, from intuitions chosen by thinking from the totality of their world of ideas. When an individual experiences thinking as a living spiritual reality within, moral impulses arise from the true self, and by acting upon them, one attains true freedom. For Steiner,
You cannot attain true freedom without that true moral will. Like a lot of people, like for example, a lot of people accept Christianity just because a lot of people say, "Oh, like my friend made me do it." If you cannot accept or commit to an ideology or a religion or to the truth of Jesus Christ Himself without your own moral free will, like God gives us free will to choose freedom. Like morality should come from our free will. It should always be a moral free will, not just you're doing it for vanity, not just that you're doing it for like some other motive or gain. Like it should be out of your true moral free will, not just something like you need to show other people. Like other people make give charity donations to other, but in front of a camera. Like not just that, you have to like do it from your own moral freedom. Like even in case of like Steiner also talks about, even in case of relationships or marriages, only those relationships and marriages that have love for each other from their own moral free will, not just by circumstances, not just by karmic, not just by like any other tradition whatsoever. Like love should come from their own moral free will. It's not something that can be like attributed by some arranged marriage or some kind of shit. Like even like base physical attraction, not just that, not just base physical attraction. Like it should come from a true moral free will. Like that's what he actually talk about in the deep philosophical aspect and deep spiritual aspect.
Freedom is located in human thinking, and the highest stage of individual life is to think pure ideas without relying on sensory experiences. Through pure intuition, we directly grasp these ideas from the realm of thought itself. What one then finds is not a separate other world behind appearances, but the same world understood in its true spiritual nature. This is the core of Steiner's epistemology, which explains how knowledge of reality is possible. The true reality of the sensory realm remains hidden from human consciousness only to the extent that the soul's perception is limited to the senses. When the world of ideas is added to sensory perception, consciousness experiences the sensory world as objective reality. The fundamental maxim of free men is to live in love towards our actions, and to let live in the understanding of the other person's will. After forming his foundational ideas in the first half of his life through engagement with natural science and philosophy, Steiner's next task was to form ideas of the spiritual world itself.
Like what he's actually saying is, so in order for someone to actually like quit an addiction or conquer the base desires, you can never persuade them to actually do it. It should actually come from their own moral free will. Like you can never persuade people to do something they don't want to do. You cannot impose your will upon others. Like that doesn't actually work for you to get the intended desired result. Like everything someone should do should actually come from their own moral free will. That's what he talks about in the philosophy of freedom itself.
Encountering Nietzsche's writings was an important event in Steiner's life. He was both
This is an important event in everyone's life when they encounter Nietzsche's writing. A lot of people say Nietzsche is like pessimistic nihilism, and like a lot of people say he was like a failure of philosopher, but Nietzsche is super fucking interesting. Like if you be totally honest, a lot of what he says is black pill reality, and a lot of things actually say it's actually like true. Like a lot of things he actually says is true, like 100%.
attracted and repelled by his views. However, he felt a certain kinship with his struggle. He saw Nietzsche as one who was destined to participate in the scientific age of the time and to be shattered by its impact. Nietzsche looked for spirit in that age, but found nothing. In the meaning of their thoughts,
Yeah, there's a lot of hatred towards Nietzsche, especially from the religious circles, but a lot of Nietzsche talks about the cold black pill realities. It's what's evident in today's time itself. Like this Nietzsche's life is a testament of what happens if you go through that, the dematerialistic spiritual, non-spiritual philosophical path. Like it leads to nihilism and existentialism and absurdism and all those kinds of things.
Philosophers reveal the zeitgeist, just as a thermometer reveals the temperature of a room. The subconscious life of the age becomes conscious in its philosophers. Steiner spent several weeks in the Nietzsche archives, and in 1895 published his book Friedrich Nietzsche, Fighter for Freedom. He intended to make it known that Nietzsche formed an important link in the spiritual development of Western thought, which should not be ignored. Steiner also visited Nietzsche, who by then was no longer of sound mind, and had a profound experience. He writes, "The mentally darkened Nietzsche was lying on a couch. His eyes, though dying, were
Yo, I didn't even know they actually made him.
still ensouled. They received the picture of the surroundings, but it no longer reached his mind. The inner shock I experienced led to what I can describe only as insight into the genius of Nietzsche, whose gaze did not see, though directed towards me. The very passivity of this gaze rested upon me for a long time. In my inner perception, I saw Nietzsche's soul hovering above his head. It was infinitely beautiful in its spiritual light, freely surrendering to the spirit worlds it had longed for so much but had been unable to find before illness clouded his mind. Nietzsche's soul was still there, but it held the body together only from outside, the body in which it had met such strong resistance in developing its spiritual powers. I had read the Nietzsche who wrote. Now I saw the Nietzsche who carried ideas from far distant spirit realms, ideas that even here shined with beauty, though they had lost their original radiance along the way. His soul had brought golden ridges of great spirituality from former lives on earth, but it was unable to let them shine fully in the present life.
Damn, I don't know what they actually mean, bro. Like, damn, like, if what he says about Nietzsche is true, like, I hope he actually found some kind of spiritual, conclusion to his life. His life was tragic, I mean, if you think about it.
At about 35 years old, Steiner experienced a profound transformation in his soul. What had once been a strong orientation towards the spiritual world of ideas, with less attention to sensory detail, changed into a new attentiveness to the physical world. The sensory world began to appear rich and significant in itself, and could show something that only it can reveal. He considered it an ideal to become familiar with the physical world purely through what it had to say, without carrying into it any preconceived interpretations, letting thinking be guided entirely by what the phenomena themselves present. Steiner writes, "Consequently, at that time, the full contrast between the spiritual and physical worlds appeared to my soul. I did not feel, however, that this difference needed to be reconciled by philosophical argument, as a monism, for example. Instead, I felt that one's ability to stand fully in this contrast with the soul means that one understands life. The experience of such contrasts, when balanced out, dies and becomes lifeless. Where there is life, the disharmony of contrast is active. Life itself implies continuously overcoming and recreating opposites. Steiner realized that those who experience the spiritual world through direct perception are able to recognize the validity present in even wildly differing perspectives. They always avoid becoming too inclined towards one or the other. The various intellectual perspectives tend to oppose one another, but spiritual perception sees them merely as standpoints, each of which provides a different view of the world. It is like photographing a house from various sides. The images are different, but the house is the same. When one walks around the actual house, a complete impression is obtained. If one stands truly within the spiritual world, one accepts the validity of whatever is correct in each standpoint. The ability to appreciate even what one has to oppose points to a fundamental attitude required for spiritual development. The evolution of consciousness.
He also talks about like the fact that in order for the spirit or in order for the soul to actually grow, soul has to come through adversity. Like soul has to face the hardships and adversity in order for the soul to grow and mature. Like, and he also talks about for example, someone to become wise. What you're actually, if you pray to become wise, what are you actually asking for? Have that painful experiences that actually make you wise. Without pain, you can actually become wise. Without adversity, you cannot actually become wise. Without adversity, you can actually like learn things that evolve you, make and contribute to the growth of your soul. You need those adversity, the spiritual hard moments. Like pressure makes diamonds. Like you need to go through that shit life, shit job, whatever. Like in order to get to that position. Like in order to be that guy. Like for spiritual growth, you need to face a lot of adversity. Like, and if you pray for God to ask for strength, God gives you like certain form of adversities that you have to overcome. Like that itself is the how spiritual growth and how your soul evolves through. Your soul's incarnate on the physical world to have learning experiences, like so to face pain and deal with adversity and learn something from it. That's how soul gains wisdom.
And the evolution of the cosmos go hand in hand. Steiner writes, I was deeply enthusiastic about what I later called knowledge conforming to reality. Knowledge does not only belong to the human being, but to the existence and arising of the world as a whole. As human beings, we are not the beings who create the essence of knowledge for ourselves. Rather, our soul provides the stage on which the world itself begins in part to experience its own becoming and existence. Without knowledge, the world would remain incomplete. In 1900, Steiner delivered his first esoteric lecture on the meaning of Goethe's fairy tale, The Green Snake and the Beautiful Lily, which he had been studying since the 1880s. He writes, it seemed as if Goethe had grown beyond his own worldview when he created that poetic work, as though compelled by the inner power of a semi-conscious soul life. I realized that, while writing the fairy tale, Goethe had looked across the boundary, as it were, into the spiritual world. For the first time, Steiner was able to share some of his inner experiences. The lecture was well received, and he was invited to present lectures regularly to the members of the Theosophical Society, founded by H.P. Blavatsky.
Blavatsky's like a crazy fucking, like... Yeah, I don't fuck with Blavatsky at all.
He did not know much of the literature published by the Theosophists, and the little he knew had been mostly disagreeable to him. However, he felt that, at that time, they were the only audiences truly interested in spiritual knowledge. He
nutcases.
accepted the invitation as long as they let him speak about the experiences he had gained through his own research in the spiritual investigation of science. He would later join the Theosophical Society and assume leadership of the German section. However, when the Theosophical Society established a special society called the Star of the East to propagate the idea that Christ had reappeared in life in India in the child Jiddu Krishnamurti,
Bruh, that's the most dumbest fucking shit ever.
it was impossible for Steiner and his colleagues to accept this new direction. As a result,
Any sane person would have done the same.
they split from it and the Anthroposophical Society was established as an independent body in 1913. Steiner often warned that the great danger of spiritual growth is false sentimentality. It permeates a spiritual movement again and again. Those most likely to face it are seekers who feel drawn to spiritual life. At first, however, it is difficult for them to gain a firm relationship to spiritual knowledge. Unconsciously, they seek a kind of numbness in sentimentality. They wish for special or esoteric knowledge. This can lead to the formation of exclusive sect-like groups.
Yeah, this is 100% important point. Like, a lot of people like have secret societies and sex and esoteric knowledge. Like, they have the ancient truth or knowledge itself. But for you to have that, you should be part of this cult. You should be part of this group. You should buy the program for $4.99. You should become part of this secret society. Like if something has some kind of like a lot of people monetizing esoteric knowledge, like these guys are not it, bro. Like spiritual knowledge is something that's free and every soul can attain it by like going inward, and like you should have the right tools for it. Like someone can actually give you the right tools for it, but you can actually the work has to be done by you. The inner work has to be done by you. It cannot be done by someone else. Like
For this reason,
secret societies and all those societies that tell you we'll do it for you, they're not it, bro. Like straight up.
Steiner stressed that truth should be the only guiding force of any spiritual community. Before the turn of the 20th century, Steiner went through what he called a soul test. He felt that he had to understand Christianity more deeply, a religion he had known intimately in childhood but later set aside. He seemed to have become a free thinker or radical, a fellow traveler with Nietzsche or Max Steiner. Steiner believed that one does not arrive at knowledge by forcing one's own viewpoint on everything, but rather by immersing oneself in foreign currents of thought. But these were only way stations. Important though they seemed, they were only trials. Yet as they occurred, Steiner had to live them to the full, but he passed through them. Now he felt that further inner development could only proceed through Christianity. This was a trying time for my soul as I looked at Christianity. I was able to make progress during that period of testing only by contemplating, through spiritual perception, the evolution of Christianity. A conscious knowledge of real Christianity began to dawn within me. It was decisive for my soul's development that I stood spiritually before the mystery of Golgotha in a deep and solemn celebration of knowledge. Steiner's entire effort, in fact, can only be understood within the context of the crucifixion of Christ at Golgotha. In 1900, Steiner gives a series of lectures titled From Buddha to Christ, where he tried to show the enormous advance indicated by the mystery of Golgotha in relation to the Buddha event, and that human evolution culminates in our endeavor towards the Christ event. He also begins a lecture series on mysticism of the Middle Ages, from Meister Eckhart to Jakob Böhme. Later he collected these lectures in the book Mystics After Modernism. Steiner developed the ideas that would later become his book, Christianity as Mystical Fact. His intention was not merely to present the mystical meaning of Christianity as a subjective or existential understanding, but rather the objective fact that the evolution of human consciousness and the cosmos was changed by Christ, even if there had never been anyone of Christian faith.
Yeah, that the mystery of Golgotha was a central cosmic event that actually changed the human consciousness, shifted the human consciousness to a more moral, free will based kind of consciousness, to a more like free will based consciousness that you should come to Christ based on our own free will, and he changed our consciousness things and break the conscious like a herd mentality type of conscious, like which will give rise to this an age of free will, radicalism, liberalism. So the consciousness has to be free in order to explore different kinds of ideas. The central event of Golgotha, like the crucifixion of Christ, was that event that actually shifted consciousness and started this new age of like conscious thinking.
Christianity appeared as something unique and independent from the ancient mysteries out of which it arose. For Steiner, the earth is not just a physical body, but has its own etheric and astral bodies. Thus, at the moment of the crucifixion, when the blood flowed from the wounds of Christ, he believed that all spiritual relationships on earth were transformed. It was as if the whole aura of the earth was changed as Christ became united with it. In 1903, Steiner and Marie
100%. If we actually know the whole truth of the earth, not the science things actually taught in school, you'll understand that the earth and your own body has equal spiritual counterparts. Like your body also has an ethereal and spiritual, astral and ethereal counterpart, or like an aura about what, like when you actually study with all those esoteric sciences, you can actually see like there's a spiritual reality around us, crisscrossing our reality, and you can actually like, if you're highly clairvoyant, you can actually observe the senses, sensory perceptions.
On Sivers, who would later become his second wife, began the monthly magazine Lucifer. This name
Okay, like I'll name.
was not originally related to the spiritual power Steiner later described as Lucifer, the counterpart of Ahriman. At that time, anthroposophy had not yet developed to speak of such beings. The name simply meant light bearer. Shortly after its founding, Lucifer merged with another journal called Gnosis to form Lucifer Gnosis. In that monthly periodical, Steiner was able to publish for the first time the material that became the foundation for anthroposophic activity. It was here that he first outlined the inner effort needed to attain supersensible knowledge through one's own inner perception. He wrote monthly installments of How to Know Higher Worlds, which was later published as a standalone book. This is his most well-known work.
What he's actually talking about, like, Luciferic and Ahrimanic is concept that it's a concept in Gnosticism, like evil has like two sides. Evil are like basis are two sides to it. Like, you can actually be truly radical and has a truly radically spiritual. Some people are on high spiritual aspect, and truly radical religious radicalism, and you can actually burn yourself up. But on the other hand, you can also be the Ahrimanic concept, which is actually you can be so crystallized in materialism and money, selfishness, and no desire to help other people. You should be so like materialistic form of thinking, the selfless form of thinking that can also be like one aspect. So he also talks about the two dichotomies within Ahriman and the Luciferic thinking, and the Christ force is a balance. You should have the balance of the spiritual and the materialistic in order to have the psychic wholeness of life itself. It is a balance between two aspects.
All the exercises described in the book How to Know Higher Worlds are the spiritual correlate suited to the West, of that for which the Orient longs, to bring the rhythm of the process of breathing into the process of cognition. If our thinking had the same tempo as our breathing, many secrets of the universe would be disclosed to us. Steiner also wrote a series of articles called From the Akashic Record.
What the fuck was it said?
Steiner
I didn't even hear it, bro.
breathing, many secrets of the universe would be disclosed to us. Steiner also wrote a series of articles called From the Akashic Record, the basis for an anthroposophic cosmology. He writes, an anthroposophic book is meant to be received into inner experience. This leads to the gradual awakening of a certain understanding. This may be a very faint inner experience, but it can, indeed should, occur. And the strengthened depth gained through the exercises described in How to Know Higher Worlds is just that, a fortifying deepening. This is necessary for progress on the spiritual path, but a properly written anthroposophic book should awaken the spiritual life of the reader, and not merely be a collection of information. Reading it should be more than reading. It should be an experience accompanied by inner shocks, tensions, and resolutions. I realize how far the substance and inner power of my books are from invoking such an experience in the soul of the reader. But I also know that my inner struggle over every page was to attain as much as possible in this way. I do not adopt a style that allows subjective feelings to be detected in the sentences. In writing, I subdue what comes from warmth and deeper feelings to a dry, mathematical style. This style alone can be an awakener, for the readers themselves must awaken inner warmth and feeling. They cannot let those feelings simply flow into them from a description, while their attentiveness remains passive.
That explains why Steiner's text seems so dry, like it was for us to awaken the spiritual warmth.
Steiner started to experience what he called imaginations, inspirations, and intuitions. The period between 1901 and 1907 or 1908 was when he experienced, with all the powers of soul, the realities and beings that approached him from the supersensible world. Many experiences arose in Steiner when he was writing his book, Theosophy.
Everybody who goes through this spiritual path has kind of experiences with the spiritual world, like Nikola Tesla had some kind of spiritual entities contact him, young Carl Jung, like everybody's engaged in this spiritual philosophy, has some kind of like a spiritual experiences. It's kind of like crazy.
Published in 1904, it presents the fundamental truths underlying the whole domain of spiritual science. At every step he endeavored to retain a connection with scientific thinking. This assumes particular forms as a spiritual experience deepens and broadens. In Theosophy, It seems as though the tone completely changes the moment he passes from describing the nature of the human being to presenting the soul world and spirit land. He writes, "True, the first look into the spirit land is still more bewildering than the first glimpse into the soul world, because the archetypes in their true form are very unlike their sensory reflections. They are, however, just as unlike their shadows, the abstract thoughts. In the spiritual world, all is in perpetual, mobile activity in the process of ceaseless creating. A state of rest, a remaining in one place, such as we find in the physical world, does not exist here because the archetypes are creative beings. They are the master builders of all that comes into being in the physical and soul worlds."
You can actually have this experience if you actually consume like DMT or that kind of shit. You can have this person, you can have a peek into the astral world itself and see moving entities, all those things. You cannot find them sitting still or a state of rest itself. And spiritual entities are like having shapes, weird stuff, circles, like biblical mythology, like angels are represented with eyes in a circle, like description that Ezekiel saw, like so in the astral realm itself, like there's like a different like they don't have like physical structures in the sensory world like us.
Steiner warns that the reader who's only willing to admit the existence of the sensible world will look upon the book as merely an...
The reason why they say that is because those entities in astral realm are like formed from minds itself, like they're like physical aspects of abstract concepts. It's like a physical embodiment of these abstract concepts. That's what's in the astral world itself.
unreal production of imagination. However, it is only through this new vision of reality that one is able to stand securely and firmly in this life. Without this power vision, one gropes like a blind man through their effects. The human being reaches the supersensible world through inner effort. Before it can be known, there must be a longing to discover what lies deeper in existence than the senses can perceive. This longing prepares the way for supersensible knowledge. Just as a flower cannot bloom without roots, so supersensible knowledge cannot exist without this longing. The soul has this longing because it is formed and built for the supersensible world, just as the lungs are constructed for air. However, many reject most strongly what they most desperately need. Steiner later published An Outline of Esoteric Science, a sequel to the book Theosophy, dealing with the evolution of humanity and the cosmos. Central to Steiner's work is his description of two spiritual counterforces within human evolution, Lucifer and Ahriman. The Luciferic beings seek to tear human beings away from incarnation and escape from the world and the human experience. However, human beings need life on Earth for their development. The Luciferic tendency predominates among seekers who...
Yeah, this extreme form of spiritualism and radicalism that also the Gnostics actually display, also religious fanatics and Gnostics. Like, everything in the physical world, the material world is like bad and evil. Like, we should ascend to the higher dimension. Like, also it's same kind of rhetoric by religious radicals in Islam is like who do martyrdom for like uh for ascending to higher spiritual realm and disregard their human lives whatsoever. Like it's the same shit. These are Luciferic tendencies.
Pursue spiritual development without proper discipline. Such individuals become so absorbed in their own inner experiences that they become detached from reality and prone to illusions. They mistake subjective experiences and personal concerns for objective spiritual knowledge. This leads to a subtle form of...
that is like a very like not a good path someone should actually follow. Someone should actually seek truth, not just from your subjective experiences. Like you should actually seek knowledge outside of your subjective experiences. Seek knowledge outside, things that you actually been told and taught, things you actually like been taught your whole life. You should like understand various viewpoints and stuff and form your own conclusive opinion. Like you should not admit the things you actually been taught. That's why, that's based on subjective experience. It's very good to understand the other views, other ideologies itself, and test your ideology sense against that ideology. Like
egoism that obscures a clear understanding of spiritual reality. Excessive self-love and pride are two of the characteristics.
Yeah, these kinds of like if someone's ideology or worldview itself is wrong, they're like very like new conflicting statement. Like they never admitted. They're too stubborn to admit their worldview is wrong. Like you can see a lot of atheists that actually become wrong in debates. Like they become too stubborn to admit they're wrong. Same thing with any other religious views. If someone is actually wrong in some religious opinion, they become too stubborn because that itself forms their identity. Any attack on their identity itself is like an attack on their opinions and ideology. Like that's why it's really important, to separate subjective experiences and seek for the truth, regardless of your own, ideologies and preconceived notions. You should actually seek for the truth, and that may be sometimes outside, your preconceived beliefs. You should actually test it and not accept the things you actually be taught in life. Just because you're born in a family with certain religion doesn't mean you should actually consider that religion to be true itself. Like you should test those ideologies, test everything you've been taught in school, critically analyze and test those ideologies. And if it doesn't stand, it doesn't make sense. You should have that humility to know that this doesn't work in my life anymore. You should have the humility to know when you're wrong and to move forward and to accept certain new truths. It's very important to change your mind when you figure out you're actually wrong on certain topics. Not just be stubborn about it just because someone attacks your identity itself.
Features. Whereas the Luciferic tendency is strongest in religion, the Ahrimanic impulse is strongest in science, which negates our very origin as spiritual beings altogether. When one enters a realm of spiritual beings who are intent on making certain trends of thinking singularly dominant, one-sided knowledge results in more than abstract errors. Errors of the human world become in that realm living spiritual interactions with certain beings. Steiner writes, "The absolute reality of those Ahrimanic beings is that the world must be a machine. Their realm is directly adjacent."
This is the worldview that's actually coming, the AI age that's actually going to come. Like this is the advent we're talking about. This is the extreme materialistic route. The new world order of the AI age is actually coming. Like an AI super state, AI socialist technocratic super state. That's actually what's going to come. Like this was talk about their humanic beings. This is extreme materialism, and science should be ready. So there's no sensory spiritual abstraction. It should be like materialistic only, and everybody should be in these kinds of ages. This humanic ages will be the end times ages. Everybody should be like in a thinking from a materialistic point of view. Consciousness will be shifted from purely materialistic point of view. Like everybody's will be about hoarding resources. Everybody will be out gathering as much as wealth as they can, stepping over other people, like having no regard for altruism or any form of human charity whatsoever. Everybody will be in their race for gathering as much wealth as they can.
To that of the senses. Not for a moment did I succumb to influences of that realm in my own realm of ideas, not even unconsciously. I took great care to make sure that all my inquiries were carefully and thoughtfully conscious. Even more conscious was my inner struggle with those demonic powers who tried to develop natural scientific knowledge, not through perception of spirit, but in a mechanical and materialistic.
Yeah, this is the modern science, naturalistic reductionist empirical science, which the mainstream manipulates for their own agenda. This mechanical way of thinking.
Without a third balancing force, human beings would be constantly torn between opposing extremes. This third force is Christ, our ultimate model, who holds these opposites in harmony. The goal is not to flee from the counterforces, but to become conscious of them, thereby avoiding one-sidedness. Steiner states, "Christ is verily the light which leads out of error and sin, the light which enables man to find the way upwards." And now let us ask ourselves, what was it that was lost to man in that he descended from the spiritual world, was ensnared in desires and passions under the influence of Lucifer, and then under Ahriman's influence?
When you talk about Ahriman, it can be used analogous with Satan itself.
In error, illusion, and lying in the earthly world. He lost direct vision of the spiritual world. He lost understanding of the spiritual world.
What he's actually talking about, like Christ source is a spiritual entity that balances the two opposing forces. Like it's not like everything in the material world is bad, or like everything's materialism. Like it should be the correct balance itself. You should not hate the material world. You should not hate your circumstances, but you should actually transform your circumstances. Don't be a victim to your circumstances. Not just hoard materialism, but transform your spirit, attain the psychic wholeness. You need correct balance between spirit and body. Correct balance between spirit and body will lead to psychic wholeness.
Following the First World War, Rudolf Steiner had become a public figure. However, with all his success, hostility, mockery, and ridicule were brewing among his opponents. Organized attacks disrupted his talks, and there were attempts at assassination. In 1920, the Goetheanum was inaugurated as the central building of anthroposophy, which Steiner named in Goethe's honor. It was the outward form of spiritual science, intended to unite the trinity of art, science, and religion. However, on New Year's Eve in 1922, the Goetheanum, which was made of wood, was destroyed by fire.
Of course, it's by fire. The same fire fucking narrative. Like, that's on every fucking old world buildings. Like, any attempt on spiritual science whatsoever would be seen as a threat by the mainstream. Like, they would burn that shit down, like, real quick.
Whether it was an act of arson or not is unclear.
It is 100% act of arson. Like, are you kidding me? Like, the same reason why churches are allowed to burn, like, and they will never find the arson whatsoever. Like, the same narratives in history, like, repeating. Like, we all know that shit's intentional.
Its effort, not to mention an architectural wonder, was lost overnight. Even this great disaster could not bend his iron will. He gave an address to members on New Year's Day with the flames still burning outside. He continued with a planned performance of a Christmas play and with a scheduled lecture at a nearby carpentry shop, where he referred to the tragedy, stating, "Our friends gave birth to it in love, saw it grow up in love, but now they have also had to watch it die in love." Executing a work of art in material form is important, but when human beings work with the right attitude, they create an imperishable work at the level of angels. The material artwork may pass away, but the spiritual work endures eternally.
Every spiritual evolution, like, every spiritual work have you done, has eternal existent souls, and has eternal ramifications, has eternal implications. Like, it exists in our soul. Like, so every spiritual growth is recorded in our soul. Like, it doesn't go away. It's for eternity, unless you do some kind of fucked up vices and shit that'll knock you down.
1923 was a difficult year, marked by division, disagreement, and apathy. There is conflict between old and new visions within the society. A wake-up call is needed. During the Christmas meeting of the Anthroposophical Society, in a gesture of sacrifice, Steiner would unite his karma with the society and its members. After previously staying mostly outside its administration as teacher and advisor, he then took on its leadership and refounded it as the General Anthroposophical Society. This was a turning point. Steiner laid the foundation stone of anthroposophy in the hearts of members in the form of a mantric verse, and then focused on guiding their spiritual development through intensive esoteric training. On the first day of 1924, Steiner suddenly fell seriously ill. Nevertheless, he continued with boundless energy to be active, and it was to be one of his most prolific years. He gave as many as 5, sometimes 6 different lectures each day. He created the model for the second Goetheanum, but he did not live to see its completion. Today, this inspiring architectural wonder stands defiantly in concrete. But the inevitable moment approached when even his resilient body showed the strain of his immense work. Perhaps he knew that his time was approaching. On the eve of Michaelmas, Steiner, frail and deathly ill, summoned the strength to passionately declare his final wish for the rebirth of the anthroposophical movement. This was to be his last talk. Steiner took to his sickbed in the carpentry shop, where he would remain until his death. Even as he lay dying, he kept active. His associates would often visit the bookstores and bring him a selection of new books. He continued directing the Anthroposophical Society, and through numerous written communications, he tried to reach those who could no longer listen to his spoken word. After a prolonged period of declining health, Rudolf Steiner died in 1925, at the age of 64, in his simple wooden studio where he had been confined during the last 6 months of his life. A friend who was with him at the moment of his passing stated, "The dignity of his features was enhanced by the marble whiteness of death. In the stillness of the night, with only a few candles burning, it was as if ages of human history converged to do homage. With a deep sense of reverence, I wondered who he was. I am wondering still." Soaring high above Steiner's deceased body was the noble figure of Christ, the representative of humanity, which he had carved and nearly finished. The sculpture depicts the evolutionary drama of human existence. The Christ figure represents the highest humanity that has been able to unfold on earth. He is the Redeemer, holding a balance between the opposing forces of Lucifer and Ahriman. His left arm points upwards, causing the prideful Lucifer to break his wings and fall, while his right arm points downwards, making Ahriman chain himself to the earth and remain confined in his cave. This is not to be interpreted as the Christ being destroying the adversarial powers. Rather, they are unable to bear the radiance of unconditional love and compassion flowing from him. Now, the two beings appear a second time, beside the representative of humanity. The adversaries are not yet overcome, but they depict the actual current situation within our epoch. Lucifer draws people into self-love and spiritual inflation, while Ahriman pulls them into cold intellectuality and mechanical materialism. They are hooked onto one another, demonstrating the split caused in man in the way they pull him, now upwards, now downwards. In this way, the two spiritual powers, which inhabit and are active in the supersensible realm, were made visible through artistic form. And this applies also in the same to the being of Christ. A sixth and final figure was unexpectedly added to the sculpture in its upper left corner, the being of cosmic humor, serving as an antidote for the overwhelming significance of the struggle between humanity and the opposing forces. This rock being reminds us that the cosmic drama is viewed with intense interest by beings whose future depends on the results. The gesture of looking down with humor is significant. Human beings rise to the spiritual level not through egoistic sentimentality, but through a purity of soul that always includes humor. Thus, the humorous rock being, concerned with the harmony of spiritual forces within humanity, gazes upon the scene below, embracing it with its wings as though growing towards it from a world beyond these events. Steiner was laid to rest on the grounds of the Goetheanum. Carved on his tombstone are Latin inscriptions that read, "From God we are born, in Christ we die, through the Holy Spirit we are revived." Steiner himself in his spiritual development marks the Holy Spirit. We are revived.
Damn, that's bars.
Steiner himself in his spiritual development marks the birth of anthroposophy on Earth. What came from him was he himself. Anthroposophy is Steiner. He was a man beyond his time, a teacher who stood alone on the summit of...
Truly a legend beyond his time. Like, a lot of predictions came true, and his ideas about, like, Ahrimanic and Luciferic ideologies, that's actually what's happening in the world right now. Like, there's two types of vices that actually, like, pull humanity towards spiritual illness.
A mountain and told us what he saw. His tragedy was his being so far beyond all other people. His life, entirely devoted to the service of humanity, was met with unspeakable hostility. His path of knowledge was turned into a path of thorns. Yet he walked that path and conquered it for all of humanity. He broke through the boundaries of knowledge. They no longer exist. He taught us to understand the greatest divine deed. How could he not be hated with all the demonic power of which hell is capable? But he responded with love to the lack of understanding he encountered. He died, a sufferer, a leader, an achiever, in a world that trampled him underfoot, and which he had the strength to lift up. Now he is dead, he who led you to freedom, to the light, to consciousness, to the realization of the divine in the human soul, to the self, to Christ. We, the demons, cannot tolerate this. We hunt down and pursue those who dare to do such things, with all the souls that have surrendered to us, with all the powers at our command. For the turning of the ages belongs to us. This humanity, which, bereft of God, languishes in weakness, delusion, and vice. We will not let our spoils slip away. We will tear apart those who dare to do such a thing. He dared and bore his lot, in love, in patience, in tolerance, with inadequacy, with human frailties. Now he is free.
Bruh, W Steiner, bro, that's just me doing, man. Like, W Eternalized, W Wood, bro, it's a mad legend, bros.